I'm at the Red House with Christian Arnder.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for
Hello.
being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I told you when I got here, I'm really stoked at like where this is.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful. I get to drive down a little dirt road. And I was like, wow, this feels so good.
As you were mentioning, it sounded like this reminded you a bit of your original homeland.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, there's something to like physical space, like fields and stuff that feels so good, especially for like, honestly, for things like this. It's like conversations are more easily had in spaces where there's like physical openness. There's something to like physical openness of like, I don't know, like creativity, conversation, general life, actual physical openness feels so good to me. And like we talked about a few minutes ago, it's like that might literally just be because of where I'm from.
I don't think I can convey how much I agree with that sentiment. And,
Yeah.
and I think that, like in other ways, like with this, I don't know if you'd call it an aesthetic or a lifestyle or what, a philosophy of minimalism. But I get drawn to it more and more, and I hear interesting artists talk about the value, I think, to their creativity of treating their house like an empty space, one that is not riddled with distractions. And you might have picked up from here, I'm a little bit more on the sort of like, I don't know, junk store side of aesthetics, or
It's
I
like
have been in the past.
you very much like work and live here.
Yeah.
It's like that's the vibe immediately as you come in here, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. It does have a workspace vibe to it, though.
Yeah, and I think that's great, especially like I think all those spaces are it's like whatever works for you, right? It's like my stuff's very, at least where we live now right now, it's like it's pretty separate. It's like my girlfriend's super into like kind of maximalism as far as like decoration and stuff goes. That's kind of where she feels most comfortable. So I'm like, that's cool as long as I have a space that is curated more to where I'm at, so I have a separate office, and that's very like, it's very haphazard. There's stuff all over the place. There's like a physical corner for like physical artwork. And then there's like my desk with like my computer and my iPad and that kind of thing. It's very like sections of the brain kind of vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear that too is a really beneficial practice.
Yep.
I think it was in Atomic Habits, that book. They kind of identify the value of singular use spaces.
Yeah.
And sort of, and I find that to be a conflict here, having a space where you do live and whatever, because basically on this half of the room, it might be for socializing and social life and stuff. That half of the room might be for creative productivity, and it's sort of hard to know where the line is between the two, especially right here. It's like almost in a theatrical kind of way. Right here in this space where we're talking is the exact line of the difference.
Do you ever feel like if you were just like down here like hanging out, would you be like, oh shit, I should be working right now?
Sometimes, yeah.
Is it positive? Or is it like, do you feel like, oh, cool, I can just go work right now? Or is it more of like a pressure to be like, I'm in this space where I also work, so I should be working?
I think that's a really great question. I think it's something like, because the potential to work is always right at my fingertips, I feel this guilty thing to be like, there it is. Like, what excuse do you have to choose leisure over work?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
You know?
It's kind of crazy. I mean, I think music, so much of like recording music is digital now. So much of what I do, like illustration work, design work, whatever, is digital. And it's like, it seems so easy to like be doing it because it's right at your fingertips all the time. I could sit on my couch and use my computer to work on something. So I can kind of trick my brain to be like, I'm relaxing, and it's like I'm absolutely not. I'm just working the same way I would have been if I was just upstairs in my office. And I think it's weirdly difficult to be like, no, you're not. I have to sit there and be like, no, I'm not doing that right now.
So how do you feel about relaxing? What is your relationship with relaxing?
Oh, my relationship with relaxing is awful. It's awful. It's really bad. Luckily I have people in my life who are like, you have to stop. Like, you have to relax. You have to pull yourself back a little. I'm very much a person that could work all the time. Until I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I used to literally make myself sick because I would work so much.
Really?
Like, physically sick. It was just for like a full day. I would wake up and feel awful and be like, I think I'm sick. Like, I think I have the flu or something. And so obviously my body's like, you can't do anything. You can't, because you feel so bad. Now you have to relax. So then I would for a day, maybe two, and then totally fine. And it's almost like I have no scientific proof to prove that's what's happening, but it felt like my body being like, you have to stop. You need time to sit and do nothing, relax, read, do something that's like not related to your job at all. And so I think within like the past year, 2 years, I've gotten better about that kind of thing. Like recognizing signs of like burnout, especially, or signs of like, oh, I just need to take a break, middle of the day, whatever. I just need to take a break. I used to be really bad about it, just to like keep working through, regardless of how I was feeling, or regardless of when the deadline was or whatever. As soon as the projects come in or whatever, I'm just working until it's done.
Did that sense of work ethic and that whole thing, has that always been how you are?
I don't know. I think so. I'm very I think for my entire life, it's like I've known what I wanted to do for my entire life, which is rare.
And is that what you're like?
That's what I'm doing.
That's amazing.
What I'm doing. I get to make. I think Ashley, my girlfriend, was talking to her mom yesterday, and she was like, I think her mom had said something like, one day, jokingly about herself, she said like, one day I'm gonna have to grow up. And Ashley was like, no, you don't. She was like, Christian draws pictures for a living. And I was like, yeah, it sounds insane. But like, yeah, like, I mean, I've wanted to do it for forever. It's shifted over time. It was like, originally I was going to do like fine art, studio art, stuff like that. And now I'm finally coming back to that in some kind of genuine way. But mostly it was like, I was really into like skateboard graphics and stuff like that. Where I'm from is like it's fairly rural. I wouldn't say super rural, I guess, but it's fairly rural. And so I didn't have access to fine art when I was a kid. So the stuff I was into was like cartoons, comic books, skateboard graphics, album artwork, that kind of thing. So for my entire life, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to make that stuff. I just didn't know what it meant. So when I like finally got the opportunity to start building towards that, it was like, that's it. That's what I'm working on now. So it's like, I think it kind of just naturally came with the work ethic, naturally came with this realization that I could be doing that if I worked my ass off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what age you were sort of when that started?
When I started working on stuff, or
yeah, and when you started doing this, I guess, or that epiphany of I can do this.
I was a sophomore in college. Like my first freelance job I was a sophomore in college. So it was early in the 19, something like that. So it's 19's right, because I'm turning 28 this year, so it's been that amount of time. And I already knew. I think even going into college, like earlier, I was like, I can't do like 9 to 5 stuff. It's like really not where my head's at. And so when I got the opportunity to do a freelance job, it was like, you get like, it's like anything else. You get that little taste of it and you're like, oh, I can do that. I made $50. Like, so when you get that little taste of it, it's like, I could keep doing this maybe. And then you get another one, you get another one, you get another one. And eventually you just feel like this is actually possible.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people, like, I'm very lucky to have had like people around me be like, no, that's possible. It's just really difficult. And you can do it. It's just figuring out what that path looks like. And so it would have been a lot easier, I guess, to like graduate and get like a, I don't know, like a design office job, making brochures or email templates or something. And I was already like leaning pretty heavily into like illustration, narrative art, drawing things, as opposed to logos or brochures, which I do some of that stuff now too, and I have a good time doing it now because I've worked my way into like this very specific like style, I guess. So it's
Yeah.
like even that stuff feels like something I'm doing. Whereas when I was younger, I was like, I don't know how to put those two things together yet. So I don't want to do any of the more like quote unquote graphic designy type stuff. So I guess, yeah, I was like 19-ish and then just kept going from there. And then eventually had to reckon with like, oh, you also have to take a break. Yeah.
Man, your story, what I'm picking up so far, just reminds me, I guess, a lot of where my mind has been at lately, thinking about success stories and 9-to-5s and the risk, I guess, of someone. And I started a new project recently where I've just been collecting sort of bits of wisdom from people.
Sure.
And one of the pieces that I collected this morning was like, it was just a piece of someone saying, we all think of it as a risk, and it is a risk, I suppose, to quit the 9-to-5 and to go out and do the other thing. But, there's also a great risk in putting 40 years into like one company and, living to 66 and then quitting for 10 years and then living for 10 years, like doing what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
That's also quite a risk, to have a life that maybe doesn't give you the freedom to pursue a passion. Like, what you're doing.
it's just different ways of thinking about it. You know what I mean? That's all it is. It's just like, I don't know. I think there are people who genuinely like thrive in like 9-to-5 environments. And that's amazing. Like, that's all I want for everybody really is like, if that's where you thrive, then that's where I want you to be. I'm not saying that 9-to-5s altogether are bad, like if that's what you want to do, that's where your passion is. That's how you're building the life that you want to have. That's amazing. And I love that for you. It just wasn't going to be what I could do.
I think too, another thing that a mistake we make sometimes when we talk about this is people, I think, sometimes confuse creativity with competence.
Oh yeah.
And I think what people think when maybe two people like ourselves who might have a skill set that is creative and like actually might practice creativity, there might be this sense of sort of like, oh, it's so superior to like be the creative, be the artist, and and like you just said, I mean, I don't think it's true for everybody, but I've met people who were really successful salesmen or people in business who are managerial, like good with analyzing numbers, who say about themselves like, I have zero creativity and I wouldn't even want it. Like, that's not my skill set.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important too about what you're saying.
Well, there's
It's
a
like,
strength there too.
Exactly.
It's like you know yourself well enough
Yeah.
to be like, that's not even in the ballpark of what I want to do.
It's a different competence.
It's a different thing. Yeah, it's a totally different thing. And I think everybody aspiring to be a creative is the right way to go. And I don't think everybody aspiring to not be is the right way to go. It's like we are all just trying to figure out what works for us. And it's harder and harder because it's like there's so much pressure to do everything that you can get your hands on, especially right now. And it's like, what's working just for you? Where are you at? It's like you don't need to be, in some ways, I guess, I don't want to like contradict myself, but in some ways, I guess like to be like a freelance creative or to be like working with other people is also to be like some kind of business manager. Like you have to learn how to do that stuff at some level. But if that's not like where you're thriving, then spending the bulk of your time doing that may be a mistake. You know what I mean? Like if you're not making the work in the first place, but you're promoting the work, I don't know, you're missing something. You see people all the time asking for, trying to like promote themselves to get more clients or working with specific artists or wanting to work on like a certain book, work on a children's book, make a children's book, whatever. And ultimately they're not doing the work associated with those things.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not necessarily about like making sure you're sending all the emails. You know what I mean? You also have to be making the work to demonstrate that you can in the first place. And I think right now everybody's kind of in a weird spot because, you know, like everybody needs to make money. Everything's more expensive. Everybody's looking for apartments, all that stuff. So it's like, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I understand like self promo has to be part of the game, and because it really does. But I think a lot of the times we're forgetting, and myself included, I do this also. It's like, I just think it's just part of the process. Like, I forget that like sometimes I just need to sit down and make stuff.
Yeah.
And then maybe that will lead somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm so right there with you on point. And what I've noticed about that, I think like I'm like responding heavily with what you're describing, and I think it's because it's like the creative side I don't ever really feel challenged by. Like I know
Right.
how to write songs and like kind of be in my zone creatively.
Yeah.
The other stuff, which should actually just be secondary, it should just be not should, you know what I mean? It's all malleable according to who wants to do what. But what I want is for my use of social media basically to just point toward the things that I create, and I want to create things often enough that I have things to point
Right.
to. But what I notice is that instead I get I end up losing time with creativity because I'm so bogged down and like confused and sort of consumed by this thing, trying to figure out like the perfect process of what it takes to effectively and optimally promote using all these social media outlets and stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm in the exact same boat, and I think most creatives are. It's like we're losing so much time because we're thinking about algorithms, and which feels like an insane thing to even say. But I don't know. I think it's almost like a switch that flips at times. I'm like, all of a sudden I'm very aware of it. I think social media in so many ways is designed to keep you in for as long as it possibly can. It's like it's why Instagram refreshes the way it does. It's why Twitter refreshes the way it does. It's like why everything works the way it does. It's why we get like mechanics that also like make our phone vibrate when we like something. Feels nice. You know what I mean? Like there's like this weird little, I'm in charge of this thing. It makes me feel kind of good. That was funny, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, for some reason, every once in a while, this switch flips and you're like, oh shit, I've been on this for like 30 minutes. I haven't done anything else. And it's 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's like, I don't know. It's like, if we could spend as much time making as we could on there, it would be like this massive revelation for so many people, I think. But it's also hard. I don't know. It's like this weird back and forth because it is weirdly difficult for whatever reason. I don't know the psychology behind this at all, but it's like it is weirdly difficult to be like, how can I make stuff as often as I am wasting time?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I have no idea. If I could figure that out, I would be making a lot more stuff.
Yeah, it's this weird combat between creating versus consuming, I guess, in a way. But the consumption is so passive. Like it'd be one thing if you were at a, like if I go to a museum right now or something that's a true experience, then it's like that's time consuming, and that feels like a sort of energy consuming thing. It feels like a real version of consumption.
Sure.
But with social media, it's so low commitment, and so it feels like you can really get a lot more consumption in. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to like park your car.
It's so easy.
So easy to do.
It's so easy.
You're stealing so much from yourself.
Yeah. I think it also, I don't know, something I think about in tandem with this is like how it affects what you're making. How it affects like how you approach what you're doing. Because it's like I catch myself doing this. It's like I'm never calling anybody out for any of this because it's like I also do it. But it's like, but I have to be honest with myself at a certain point and be like, did I consider how people are receiving this before I ever started working on it. And it's like, sometimes that's totally appropriate. You know, if you're working with a client who's using it for promotional reasons or what have you, I don't know. That's the only example I have. But if that's the reason, then it makes sense to consider it because you are considering like what their audience will think of it or whatever. But if you're making something for yourself and the first thing you did was consider how other people are going to feel about it, you kind of have to scrap and start over.
I agree.
Like you don't really have a choice because you've already taken yourself out of the equation.
Yeah.
And it feels really bad. Like, and once you finish it, chances are you don't even like it that much anyway.
So, yeah, there's two ways to think about that, I guess, because I agree, and there's a conflict, I guess, with all that. So I guess as a music creator, that's where I agree because I never go into recording or writing thinking about that and trying to manipulate an audience in a way that's just
Sure.
like I'm going to create something that I think you'll automatically like. I try to maintain an integrity in that process, but then there's the social media side of it, like the marketing strategy side of it.
Yeah.
And that is like that's part of I think why it feels like such a mind fuck for me because it's like I'm on Instagram and it's like I must want people.
And you're on there for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I must want people to engage with the things that I post.
Yeah.
I must want it to reach people.
I think I think you're totally right. I think we're all doing it, especially if you are making stuff. You're on these platforms because you want people to care. And I think where it does feel like a mind fuck is like when you start considering the marketing pre-making stuff.
like pre-product.
Yeah, it's like doing market research to see what illustration I make. Why would I do that? You know what I mean? It's like if it's just for me, if it's just something I want to make, why would I go and research what's doing best with my audience right now? It's like my audience isn't huge, whatever. It's like, so I am really just like throwing stuff out into the world and seeing how it does. And honestly, if there's any kind of marketing or whatever for releasing music, for releasing artwork, for making t-shirts, whatever it is, I feel like the things that end up doing the best are the stuff that was made in that very genuine space of like, I just really feel like this needs to exist. Even if, like I said, even if that's as simple as a t-shirt graphic, it's like you want to make a t-shirt that you want to wear. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so if you make that, you've done that genuinely. That's something I'd want to put on. Now, after it's done, you can start considering, how do I let people see this? How do I market this? Who's the audience for this? Who are the right people for this? You know what I mean? This, like, one t-shirt might not appeal to everybody, but it might appeal to this 100 people or this 20 people, whatever it is. And how do we pivot to that kind of, I guess, approach to creation and also marketing? Because, like we've already said, social media is so easy that I think a lot of the time it influences more of what we're doing than we even consider. Because I think oftentimes it happens with me when I've like considered how something is going to be seen or consider how people are going to receive it first. It's totally subconscious until I'm already working on it. And then I'm like, and then I catch myself being like, well, I can't do that because then they people won't like this part of it or whatever it is. And I think it ends up affecting us in this like kind of backwards way where we're like, we don't think about it at first consciously, then we're making something and we're considering all these little bits that aren't necessarily part of us. It's just part of our assumption of what people might think of it, when in actuality it needs to be like create, figure out the marketing, and go from there.
Man, I'm really glad you talked about that because I feel like it's like I feel like lately I've been on the cusp of sort of trying to understand that these are two different things. Because I think that's a big part of it is for creatives or creators or Jesus Christ.
Just getting really comfortable.
Yeah, that was a while. Her head was almost touching her spine. anyway.
Very comfy.
Yeah. For creators, creatives, it's sort of like anything that your name is attached to, or the effort to put this thing out, it's a part of this artistic vision.
Yeah.
And so anytime you start, I don't know, trying to maximize how many eyes are on it unorganically or
Yeah.
organically, just putting in effort, it's like there's a question in one's mind about whether or not you're staying true, or whether or not you're trying to sell out, or these
Yeah.
ridiculous sort of I don't know, these things we want. It's like we want the piece to be large, but we don't want to be the ones to put in effort to get eyeballs on it sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting people to see the stuff you made. I think we're all making stuff because we want people to see it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, if it's like emotional connection, if it's just to make somebody laugh, if it's to be informative, whatever it is, we want people to see it and connect to it somehow. And there's nothing wrong with that aspect of it. It's just, I think, in a world where we are so consumed with the idea of like, how much money can this make me? Like,
Yeah.
we end up reversing the order of things.
That is true. And then there's also this other side that comes to mind for me, which is we live in a time too where there's a lot of huge names that are ridiculed for just being like pointlessly famous without merit.
Sure.
Or something.
Sure.
And then you start asking yourself, well, what am I pursuing then? Am I pursuing, when you take somebody like a Kardashian or something, and people say, oh, well, they're not even talented, they're not even real,
Sure.
Creators or anything, they're just famous for being famous. Then you start wondering, well, if I use these platforms like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, am I pursuing fame itself, or am I pursuing notoriety for being good at what it is that I like? And it seems like that's a growing, and maybe that's not a new thing. Maybe that is just my weird perception of that being new, because maybe you could have said that for somebody who was like pursuing radio success in 1984.
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's like, it feels strange to like critique others' like success in a way, because it's like, I don't know what they're doing. I have
Right.
no idea. I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about the Kardashians really, other than that they are famous, and that like I've seen bits and pieces of like the show, or bits and pieces of like stuff online that they've made, quote unquote. I don't know. I have no idea how they're actually working, how they're actually involved with anything, really.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think a lot of times when, especially other creatives are critiquing like that kind of success, that kind of fame, famous for being famous, that kind of thing, it's coming from like kind of a weird, jaded place of like, why aren't I famous for doing this thing that I think is genuine? And it's like, I don't know. I don't like, I couldn't tell you. I don't know why you're not famous. I have no idea. And it goes back to what you said. It's like, is that the goal? Like, is your goal to be Kardashian famous? Because I think you fucked up already. Like, yeah. I don't think you're getting there. Because like, I talk to students about this kind of thing all the time. It's like, your goal cannot be, everybody's going to know that I made a logo for something. Mm-hmm. That's insane. There are a few designers that like only graphic designers can name off their hand. It's like Milton Glaser and like a few other people.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't walk up to a person on the street and ask them who Milton Glaser is. They don't know. That's the only level of fame you could aspire to. And even then you're pushing it. Your goal has to be, make the best thing you can and hope that the right people give a shit. Mm. And that's it. That can be your goal, and hope that you get paid enough to live comfortably. Mm-hmm. That's it. We can't be chasing like Instagram fame, TikTok fame, that kind of thing. If you want to be creating genuinely, your main goal can't be, I want to be an influencer. I want to be viral on the internet. It can be a secondary thing. Like if you're also like making stuff and streaming on Twitch, or like showing people your process, or making TikToks to talk about client experiences or whatever, that's great. I'm sure somebody finds that helpful. That's amazing. But as long as that's not your main goal,
Yeah.
you're not going to be famous on those platforms because you draw pictures. And that's not what most people, that's not getting them. And on the other hand of that, it's like, if it is your main goal, you've veered off too far. If it's a secondary thing, that's great. Make your stuff. If it's your main thing, you've already veered off of the thing that you want to be famous for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you can't be famous for that thing because you're away from it.
Yeah.
Now you're famous for having an ad before something.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I think that's important. What you're saying is important because I think there's a byproduct to this whole viral sensation
Yeah.
thing that people. I believe I started to become aware of this from like the American Idol days. That people's initial exposure to you has a big influence on
It does.
what they remember you for or something. And so here, I don't know, one example being American Idol. So I think the first season of American Idol, there was this novelty aspect to it so that Kelly Clarkson's celebrity was a little larger than the show because it was like she won the show and we all agreed to the terms. But as time went on, I think it became more this thing that was like kind of like a season of an MTV show or like Real World or some shit, or like the season of a VH1 show. Like this is just the cast to the season of this TV show.
Right.
But then after like this season, I'm not really going to give a shit, what these people's careers turn into.
Absolutely not.
I feel like the interest in those people kind of went down over time. And then a second example of that, there's this country artist out of like Oklahoma or some fucking where, and he had this alter ego, Earl Dibbles Jr.
I know that. Yeah, I know.
You know
I know
who
what
he
you're
is?
talking about. Yeah.
So when I first discovered this guy, he was trying to do the songwriter thing, and Earl Dibbles Jr. was just somebody who on the side, he just was a YouTube character.
It's like
that
comedy,
Yeah.
country kind
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
Since then, I'm maybe his audience has grown, but Earl Dibbles Jr., the alter ego, which was a more virally sensational character than his songwriter stuff, that's become his career, it seems. He's like a radio personality now.
It happens to people all the time. I mean, even on more micro levels, it's like it happens to visual artists who make one thing that sells really, really well. And then somebody else comes to them for it. Somebody else comes to them for it. And before you know it, you've done 100 pieces that are basically all the same thing, just slightly different each time. And for some people, it works really well. People like Takashi Murakami come to mind. It's like all of his stuff feels very, very similar. But he's also been doing it for forever. Before anybody asked him to do it, before it's like rappers love Murakami stuff. Like they have merch with his stuff on it. They have like Billie Eilish just did a collab with Murakami like a couple years ago. It's like before it was that, it was this like genuine experience of like he is making a lot of the same stuff over and over and over. Or like Keith Haring even. Very similar vibe over and over and over and over. Different narratives, different ideals, different ideas, all this stuff, but genuine before anybody cared. I think the concept you're talking about it's not uniquely modern, but we're living through it in a unique way because you have the chance to post this thing that you just did because you thought it was funny. You just did because, I don't know, you had an afternoon. And next thing you know, it's your entire personality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if you don't lean into it, it's gone almost immediately. It's like there are people on TikTok that are like, one video goes viral, they get 1 million followers, and then nobody cares about anything else they post because that one video was really, really funny.
Yeah.
It could have been anything. But now they're just trying to capitalize on that over and over and over and over, and nobody cares anymore. They still have 1 million followers, but nobody's watching anything that they're posting. So it's like we're living through this like weird virality moment in like a very weird way where it's like it almost doesn't matter if you don't want that whole thing to be your personality. And then going back to like Earl Dibbles Jr., it's like where does your life live? Like where are you in this space of like, you wanted to make music, you wanted to like, you had like this genuine outlet, this genuine thing you were putting out, and then it got kind of overtaken by this persona,
Right.
by this thing that maybe you just thought was funny at the time, and now it's your whole thing. So like, for people that happens to, I'm always curious about like where or how they feel.
I am too.
Where are you at? I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. It's like even like artists who, like massive artists. I think we were talking about like Doja Cat or something at the time. It's like singles come out, they go crazy. Millions of streams, numbers like crazy. But then the album comes out, it has those 3 singles on it. And it doesn't, sales numbers aren't good, or it doesn't really, which isn't like a super big measure of success, but sales numbers aren't good. People don't like the album. When you see them perform, they're performing mostly singles that did really, really well. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm sure there are people who are listening to the full album, but I always wonder how those artists feel when there's probably like song number 10 out of 12 on the record is like one of their favorite songs they've ever made, but nobody cared.
Yeah.
Because they released these singles and those have like millions and millions and millions of streams. That's what they're known for. That song didn't sound like one of those, so now nobody cares about that one. It's like, I always end up wondering how artists feel when now they have to take this thing that went really viral. They have to like take it on to their personality.
I wonder that too. And because I wonder if like, I guess I try to operate in this way where I keep my art and my creative sort of persona, if you want to call it that, or whatever I put out, it's kind of consistent with me. Mm-hmm. And I've heard other artists sort of talk about that, and sort of, I think there's a bit of a divide within arts. Some people kind of operate in the same way that maybe I do, that's sort of like persona isn't the thing. Like you can abandon persona and you can like pursue the path of true, sort of the true individual, and that can be a part of what you're putting out, and like it's what people experience. And then there are other people who say, yes, you can do that, but the persona is extremely fun, it's extremely interesting, it's like and it gives you something to separate from yourself, and that to me is what I wonder if there's a great benefit to it, because I wonder if what you can do is sort of separate the value that we put on the ego. Like, like for me, if somebody doesn't like song 10 or whatever, that's like a little part of me that they're rejecting. A little part of my real name that they're rejecting. But if my name were Billy Strings, or if it were Billie Eilish, or if it were The Weeknd, you know, if it were separated in that way, and I knew that was just a personality that existed to represent artwork to the public or whatever, maybe it wouldn't be as painful. Maybe it would be a little more bearable for, you know, for that persona to
I've
bear
never
a
even
lot
thought
of
about it that way. That's a really interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I mean, and also, maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it is, maybe song 10 is their favorite, and they're just like, I don't know, I got to make it.
Right.
So whatever.
Maybe they care more about...
I'll perform it on a tour, and nobody will know it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and I don't know, I guess it's like, I wonder about other creatives' egos. Because everybody is just obsessed with their own. You know what I mean? And I'm like, and I wonder if I was in their position, would I be hurt by this? Would I be like, okay, that's fine? You know what I mean? And it's, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I have no idea. But I'm curious about other creatives' egos and like how that plays into what they're making.
Well, you know, with musicians and with actors, well, especially with actors, because they literally take on a persona for their jobs. Musicians have the option to kind of do that, you know, like a lot of people, like we were talking about. Some people apparently don't. You know, I think people like Springsteen because they think he is him. And then they like The Weeknd because he's The Weeknd.
Yeah.
With visual artists, I mean, is there an equivalent to that? Is there a comparable sort of similar thing?
I mean, I guess so, but like I wouldn't say it's as common because it's like you have people like in the history of art, it's like the one that comes to mind and one that everybody knows, like Andy Warhol.
Right.
Like Andy Warhol was a persona. You know what I mean? Almost like first and foremost, it was part of his art form to be this like publicly known figure that was famous but weird and had these elaborate parties that were like taboo and strange, and like the whole thing was an art piece. You know what I mean? And so it's hard to like pick him apart. What kind of person was he? We know now, you know, like through biographies and documentaries and all this stuff. But at the time, it would have been very difficult to know who he was, especially if you weren't like one of his closest friends or family members or something. So
It makes me think of Dali too, I guess.
yeah, it's like there are people I think in visual art who are like enigmas. You don't necessarily understand a lot about them. Or they do have a very public persona, but it's not as common. And I think part of the reason for that is like visual art specifically, people aren't going to it for that. You can go to music, you can go to an artist because you like the way they seem. You know what I mean? You can like their attitude towards things or how they publicly present themselves. Visual art kind of operates in a different way because it's like most of the time you can just approach it as I like that thing that was made, and I don't know who made it at all.
Yeah.
I've never seen them. I don't follow them on anything. If I do, they don't post themselves that often. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't know anything about this person.
Man, that's so true.
Yeah.
And like when I think about, I mean, and I guess connecting this to the earlier part of thinking about how social media works, I think it's a lot more common for me to see musicians sort of use social media platforms to represent their whole life as a part of that persona. Like,
Yeah.
see me sitting by the fire with my boots on. Like
That's my vibe, yeah.
This vibe is the same as what my music is. You know, like this
Yeah.
vibe runs through my whole life. Whereas I think with visual artists, I see a lot more of using that space to represent the art rather than the person.
Yeah. I'm kind of having an epiphany right now. I'm just thinking about it because it's like, you're so right. And then I think about people who are in like really successful spaces as visual artists right now are also doing a little bit of both.
Really?
I
Okay.
think so. It's like, I mean, even just like, there are a couple people like, what's his actual last name? I don't know. Andy J. Pizza hosts this podcast called Creative Pep Talk. He's done it for years, and people love him. He has a great personality, especially for podcasting. He's like, it's just him every week, most of the time, just talking about something that's been on his mind as far
that's
as
cool.
creativity goes. He's an illustrator, he's a designer, whatever. He oftentimes is just posting little snippets of him talking about something, you know, so even like in tandem with posting this like new children's book he has coming out, the next post is just him doing something, you know what I mean? And it's like, I think people like to see this, like, cause it feels more genuine.
Yeah.
It feels like, oh, that person is alive. They're doing a thing.
Yeah.
Or people like, Aaron Draplin, this designer from Portland, his like almost his entire thing now is just his personality. People just like him. So he's done like tours. He's a graphic designer, but he's done speaking tours of the country.
Huh.
Just talking about his life, just because people like his personality.
See, isn't that so strange?
It's very odd.
But I mean, I guess in a way it makes sense. I mean, even with your art in a sense is sort of like your personality taking a different personification or something.
You want it. I mean, I think the dream of every artist is for your art to represent you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does. But I don't know if everybody gets it all the time. And I think maybe allowing people to see you as a person do other things helps them feel more connected. They understand your art more because they saw you. Potentially. I don't know.
Absolutely, dude.
I'm
No,
just
I
thinking
mean-
about it and I'm like, I'm having an epiphany over here because I'm like, because Ashley's always telling me, she's like, you have to post yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to fucking do that. And she's like, you have to. It would make, like, it makes sense. And I'm like, I don't know if it makes any sense. And now we're having this conversation. Ashley, I'm so sorry.
I'm with you. This is an epiphany episode because this is refreshing my ideas about all this stuff, and it's making me think of it differently. And I'm liking it. I mean, it sounds like very positive things too.
It is positive. It's like I think I've been taking this approach of like, I don't want people to think I'm like vain. I don't want people to think I'm like posting myself for no reason.
Exactly.
And then when like I only have Instagram because I make stuff. That's it.
Yep.
That's the only reason I have any of this shit is because I make stuff so people can see the stuff I make.
Yep.
I don't want to be like, oh, by the way, here's me eating a hot dog. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like
yeah.
Like, why would I do that? And then, but now I'm like, because that's very genuine and people would enjoy it.
Yeah, man. There's a, it obviously always depends.
That's so funny.
I'm definitely not likely to post any videos of me literally eating a hot dog, but
I might now.
yeah, why not? Especially if it's like on brand with sort of the vibe and who you are and everything. But yeah, like I have been such a slow bloomer with all of this stuff. Like, I mean, I remember when Instagram was a brand new thing, and my friends who are just a little more, they're the type who were like, this is a cool thing that's happening and I'm gonna do it. They were all on it for years, and I was just like, fuck that. Like, I'm not doing this stupid shit. I just play shows. And then like slowly but surely you get on Instagram, and then TikTok happens, and then you're like, man,
I'm not doing TikTok. Yeah.
I've already done enough. Like, I don't want to be on any
slowly
of
but
this
surely
stuff.
you're also on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of how everything goes. It's like,
Well, somebody told me once, I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, please.
Somebody told me once, like, I forget even how it was said and what the context of the conversation was, but somebody just pointed out once, like, and it might have been to do with TikTok. I really can't remember now, but they were like, are you using this thing? And I was like, no. And they were like, isn't that like where people are? And I was like, yeah. And they were like,
I guess so, yeah.
Are you not interested in like going where the market is? And I was like, well, fuck.
I guess. I don't know.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I don't know how to view that stuff anymore, really, because it's like you have to be a part of it in a lot of ways. Like, you do have to go where the market is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is there's a natural resistance, and I think a lot of it comes from, I keep saying like creatives do this, creatives do that. I think it comes naturally to people who are trying to make stuff in like this genuine way. It comes naturally to be like, I don't want to do that thing that feels not genuine.
Yeah.
And I think that it all cycles backwards to being like, if you are a creative, then you work by yourself, then you also have to be your business manager, and you also have to be your market analyst, and you also have to be the person who manages the money and like whatever. So it's like, if you have to do all of that, you also have to be where the people are.
Yeah.
You also have to be where the market is. And it's difficult, but it's not all bad.
Well,
If you can handle it and you can approach it in a genuine way, it's not all bad.
absolutely. I mean, somebody who says some good shit about this, Ryan Holiday, who's the guy behind Daily Stoic.
Oh, yeah.
He's a successful writer, and he's also, I think, been pretty helpful in getting other, maybe more seasoned or older writers kind of to change their perspective on some of this stuff, which is obviously what Stoicism is great for. And he would be, if he were here, I'm sure he would be like, well, there's two things you could think about. One is that if you take a medium like music or visual art or books or whatever, those are great mediums, but nobody is entitled to sort of, like me, like I could sit here all day and whine about, I just want to do what I originally wanted to do, which is like put things out on CD and fucking sell those. But everything has changed since my original sort of intro into this stuff when CDs were relevant. And now there's all these different spaces where people's attention are, and like rightfully so, they're totally at liberty to be in those spaces. And so for me, I should probably notice that like these are more spaces to engage with people in the name of what I really want to do, which is make music.
Right.
It's not make CDs, it's make music. And these are ways to reach those people. And the second part of that is, to see it as a positive opportunity rather than a burden, which I think is what I usually tell myself a lot of this stuff is.
Yeah.
TikTok felt like, oh, this burden. I don't want to be involved in another thing that I got to learn and be foolish about and all this stuff. But I could just as easily just change my mind about it being a burden and just think, well, instead it's another way for me to try to reach people and share with them what it is that I do.
It's something to learn.
Yeah.
It's something to approach. And yeah, I agree with you. I think trying to figure out a way to creatively approach these things as new opportunities as opposed to burdens is like the crux of the whole thing. It's like the way you can feel good about it is by considering who's getting to see it, who's getting to hear it. Like, and even if it's like, there's this quote, I don't remember who said it. I don't remember where I saw it, but I think about it all the time. It's like, even if not that many people see the thing, right? It's like 20 people, right? 20 people liked it. 20 people listened to it. 20 people watched, like whatever it is. Doesn't feel like a lot on social media. It feels like a very low number. But if 20 people were in the space where you made it, you'd be overjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Be huge. That's a huge deal. If why are 20 people watching you do that thing? It's like that's 20 more people.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, 10 new people that you've connected with on some level. 10 people who already like your stuff and 10 people who didn't know who you were before. Yeah. And that's crazy to think about. If we can think about it from like a very human perspective and think about how like somebody saw this, a person sitting on their couch saw this thing and they were like, I like this. That's amazing. It's like and if we can approach it in the same way that if a stranger walked up to us on the street and was like, I saw that thing you made, that would make you feel so good. Yeah. And if we can think about social media in that way, then you can have a lot more of a positive experience with it, I think.
Oh, I think that's spot on. I mean, and thinking of it in terms too of like venues and art gallery openings or something like that, I would imagine same thing. I played at Fancy Groceries last night, and I think we had about 40 or so people there, and on social media it'd be like, I can't believe this image only got 40 likes. Yeah. But then when you're in a real room with people, it's like
40 people is a lot of people.
It is. It's a good number. Yeah. It's a good number of tickets to sell.
Yeah. It's a good number of people to have conversations with.
Yeah.
Like or to care. Like, I don't know. It's kind of amazing when you can take a step back to be like, that's 40 actual human beings doing a thing. Yeah, I don't know. And I've been trying to do that more lately with like, I post on socials less, I think now than I used to. Just because I want to be making more stuff. Yeah. But now if a few people see it, I'm like, that's awesome. That's so sick. I'm glad a few people saw the thing I made. Maybe one of them will ask me to do something.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they send it to somebody else. I have no idea. And so there's a lot of like in being a creative, but also just in socials, whatever. There's a lot of like flexibility with how things happen. And I think social media can feel really rigid. It's like post at noon, send it to this person, put it on your story, also use hashtags, also do all this other shit. And it's like, it can feel really rigid, but in actuality, there's this like weird flexibility to it where like somebody could have screenshotted it and sent it to their friend. And you have no idea.
Yep.
Or they could have gone directly to Spotify from your Instagram and sent the song through Spotify to somebody. They never liked the video because they liked the song, so they went to you know what I mean? Like, you have no idea. There's all this like weird flexibility, and I think creativity works like that in general. It's like the way we make stuff, very flexible. It comes and it goes. It moves in and out. It's not necessarily something we're in control of. Social media is the exact same way. It's not necessarily something we're in control of. We can try to be, but the algorithm changes every single day, so I don't know what the point is. So it's like allow it to be flexible, and it's more fun.
Well, you just spoke to something that is part of one of the questions that I thought to ask you. There's a few from
Please,
the conversation so far that I was just like, oh, I'm trying to remember that. I'll try to remember that. One you just touched on. I think I learned more and more talking about how with creativity is often it can be fruitless compared to some things, because I totally agree. Like we I think we often like the idea that we're in control of creativity, and that like it's our ego that did all this stuff, when really I think it's kind of like we're sort of receptive to potential in this way, you know. But I guess I just watched the second Black Panther movie, and this quote stuck with me, and that might be why I'm phrasing the question this way, because Michael B. Jordan says, like, more than once in the movie, he says something to the effect of like, why is always going to be the better question than how. So I think that's my question, is rather than asking you how creativity, why creativity for you? Why visual art? Why did this find you?
Sure.
Or why did you find it?
I think going back to like the very beginning of your point about like it being an ego thing, like, and us really wanting creativity to be something we control. I always think about like human beings being this like part of nature, this like grander scheme of the world around us. And I think when I think about creativity in that way of like, we're all just a part of what's going on. You know, we really, truthfully, we don't have control over a lot. You know, it's this, our lives very much ebb and flow, and we don't have a lot of control over most things. We convince ourselves we do because we want to feel better about our existence, and we're lucky in that fact. We're lucky to get to rationalize and do all that stuff. But I think to approach creativity as this like natural force that we don't really know how it works all the time is an amazing experience if you can just let it happen. It's kind of like there's a million books about like the science of creativity, and I'm always talking about how like I wish somebody would just write a book about none of that. I don't care. I don't care about the psychology of creativity. It doesn't bother me. I don't know. I don't think you do. Because it feels so natural to me. I think creativity, why creativity? She's having a great time.
Yeah, she is.
I love it. Why creativity for me is, it's complicated and it's very simple. For me, it's the only thing that I've ever been like drawn to, like without even thinking. From like the moment I could draw anything, that's what I was doing. I don't know why. It's not a family thing. It's not a, like, I don't know. It's really hard to describe. It's like my parents were super encouraging. They would be like, yeah, you want to like color or something? And like, yeah, you can do that, but kids color, you know what I mean? It's like, but I think it was like one of the only things that I've ever felt like really naturally drawn to doing is like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's just what I do. And I try not to question it. Like I try not to think about it too hard, because it's like, I don't want to convince myself not to. So here we are. And but on the more complicated end of the spectrum, it's this like thing that gives me the ability to emotionally connect to people, gives me the ability to describe things that are otherwise difficult to describe. It gave me a lot of opportunity to express my emotions towards things, especially when I was younger. Like even especially like it's helped me work through complicated topics in my own life. You know what I mean? It's like, and at a certain point, the why is because I'm thankful that I get to do it. You know what I mean? It's like I wake up every day and I know that that's what I'm going to do. and that's amazing. You know what I mean? It's like I don't even have to think about it. I don't question it. I wake up and I go, I could make that thing. And that's crazy to me. So it's
Yeah.
like the why just ends up being because. Like, I don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that I'm going to be doing. So it's like, here we are. And everything else is in service of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I worked in coffee for years. I'm going to work in coffee again just for a little bit, just for fun. But like, I worked in coffee for years so I could also be making stuff the way I wanted to be making it. You know what I mean? It's like everything else for my adult life has been because I want to do that thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have another way to describe it.
As much as I like, it sounds counterintuitive, I think.
Sure.
But, and she's funny. But I ask that question almost in that same spirit, which is funny because I asked the question just to have the opportunity to hear you talk about it, but like at the same time, I recognize it's almost like part of the answer, and part of what I'm getting from you is sort of like the less you question why, the better.
Yeah.
And the more that you act upon the impulse and the intuition to do it, maybe the better. And like asking why too much, I think might be disruptive in a way or something.
Yeah, it's like for me, there's no reason for me to be like, why do I want to make that? Why do I want to do this?
Yeah.
There's really not a reason to it because all it's gonna do is freak me out.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know why. Maybe I should do something else.
Exactly.
Maybe I give up. Which happens sometimes. Like, I mean, it would be disingenuous to say that doesn't happen. I think every creative goes through that at some point. You're like, why am I doing this? Why the fuck am I doing this? And it's like, because for most people, especially if it's something you genuinely want, you don't really have a choice. You're doing it one way or the other. Even if you try to quit doing this half of it,
Yep.
you're doing the other half.
That's so true.
So it's like, I mean, I've had friends who were like illustrators and designers, and they stopped doing that because they were like, I don't want to deal. I was like, don't want to deal with clients anymore or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's great. What are you going to do? And they're like, I don't know. And it's like 2 years later, they're a tattoo artist. 2 years later, they're like having gallery shows.
Right.
And it's like, you can't get away from it. If it's something you just decided to do on a whim, yeah, you can get away from it. But if it's something you've been wanting to do for forever, you're going to be doing it somehow.
Yeah.
And I think being open to that is also good. It's like, it doesn't always have to look exactly the same.
Right.
It can change, but chances are you're coming back to it somehow, in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I can speak to that. And there's a devil in it. And it's like a devil in it that if you betray that devil, it will go to war with you or something. And I've seen that in other artists as well. And like some examples come to mind where I've known of musicians who in their careers sort of made that question a part of their display out front. It was like almost they became like this cynical representative of musicianship, but this sort of like undermining the fact that they were musicians. I feel like that never goes well. I feel like that always sabotages the person when you start to there. I guess in other words, there's a way to take that question of why do this, turn that into art in a way that states that it is all meaningless.
Yeah.
And that is bad, I think.
I think something I just thought of too is like I see a visual artist all the time tweeting or posting on Instagram, whatever, and talking about like in this verbiage specifically, they'll be like, here's a silly little thing I made, or here's I just do my silly little drawings. And it's like, I don't know if you realize what you're doing. I don't know if you realize how you're talking about the thing that you are making. Because, yeah, it's like, it's lighthearted, it's fine, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I'm not doing that about my work ever. Because I make stuff that's whimsical, I make stuff that is funny, whatever. I understand that. But to me, it's not a silly little thing I made. It is the result of years of work. It is the result of understanding what I'm trying to do and still working through what I'm trying to do. And I think in the same way, it's like if you become this cynical representation of the thing you're making, it affects you in a way that you're not even aware of. And before you know it, you're sick of doing the thing.
Yep.
And it's weird. It's a weird space to exist in, of being cynical about the thing that you're already doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an unnecessary fight. And
Yeah.
I've seen it take some strange. I mean, I had a spell with it when I was like, I don't know, in a weird place. Of course, there's something to be said about like the relationship one has with themselves. Like maybe they feel cynical about themselves. Maybe these people feel silly about themselves. Like they, and often I think it's like I often think that when we use persona in that way to kind of convey something. For example, if someone's saying, this is just a silly thing, what they're actually saying is the total opposite. They just are veiling that or trying to. They feel self-conscious about how seriously they take it, and so they make it seem...
They're trying to disconnect from it so that way if people don't like it, it's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
And I understand the pressure, and like you said, like I've gone through that. I've dealt with like being cynical about what I'm doing and why am I doing this and what is the point and blah blah blah. But it's like I think it's such an important struggle to have. I think most people go through it, and I think it's such an important struggle to have that I think that's a moment where you sit down with yourself and genuinely reflect on what you're doing and try to understand why you're feeling that way. That's what you need to be doing. That's not that it's a moment to be working through it. You know what I mean? It's a moment to say, is this genuinely how I feel about this, or am I frustrated about something? And 9 times out of 10 for me, it's because I'm frustrated about something. It's like, this didn't go the way I wanted it to. This client interaction was off. They didn't like it. Now I have to start over. Whatever it is, it's like 9 times out of 10, it's just frustration. And the other one chance is because I approached it wrong from the jump. And I have to acknowledge that, and I have to fix that. Yeah. It's like so much of creativity is ego in the first place. And so much of the back end is confronting your own ego when you're feeling a certain type of way about something you did. So,
which is such a mindfuck, you know, it's such an odd combination of little pieces. But that is exactly right.
I'm so good at this. I'm so bad at this.
Yeah, it's a mess, man.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful mess.
That's exactly right.
So you said something early on in the conversation too that kind of also makes me reminds me, I guess, of your tattoos and stuff.
Sure.
You when you started talking about the negative space and the open space here, I mean, I felt like that was like a statement made by somebody who's sensitive to visual, like the visual sort of like reality that we're in.
Sure.
And I noticed that like with a lot of people, you know, your canvas for life and stuff is extended onto your arms.
Sure.
I'm wondering what you can take it either way, whether you want to like take it in terms of nature and space and all that shit, or to skin. But I'm just wondering if I can challenge you to like talk a bit about just negative space and potential space. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean,
empty space.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's a difficult one. I think for me, the most peaceful I'm ever going to be is in like a space where I feel like I have the room to move. Even like in work, like physical workspaces, I feel like I need to have room to like push things away from me and focus in. I feel like I need that in nature aspects as well. I want to have the room to like expand outward. If you want to think about that in like a metaphysical way, if you want to think about that in a physical way, it's both. It's whatever. I think as far as the way my work goes in that, I think a lot of times when I'm making stuff, my entire perspective, especially diving in, when I start sketches and stuff, it's all about the composition. It's all about where stuff is, where stuff's living. I am not a person that can sit down and just start making something. I'm not a person I'm not messy when it comes to what I'm making. I'm not messy when it comes to like, my space is messy, but it's controlled. So I think in a weird way, it's like this physical space that I recognize as important to me mentally, emotionally, whatever, physically, also finds its way into my work in composition. Because for me, I have a graphic design background. It's how I was trained, what I learned first. But it's always been about like how things are interacting with other things. I don't want something to feel unintentionally uncomfortable. Intentionally uncomfortable, totally fine. It's really hard to describe because it almost feels like I'm describing like math that doesn't exist. It's like, I'm not a mathematical person. I don't like grids. I don't like things like that. I know a lot of designers design stuff like on massive grids and make sure everything's perfectly measured. I'm not that way at all. So it's even more difficult to describe. It's like I guess it's not a bragging thing, but like whatever. It's like I have this really strong visual acuity for things where I'm like, I know where things need to go. I know where things need to go for this piece. I know. I'm not worried about it. I had a professor in college who he said he one time was like, if it looks right, it is right. Talking about how if something's in the middle of the canvas, but there's a piece that stretches over here and now it looks like it's slightly to the right or to the left for some reason, it's wrong. Even if you measured it to be right in the middle, if it looks like it's slightly to the right now because of the composition, now it's wrong because you want it in the middle. So now you have to scoot it to the left, and even though it's not technically in the middle, it's visually right. And that's how I've measured everything. If it's visually right, I'm good. That's all I can say, really. It's like negative space plays a big role in that because it's like, where does something not need to be? And I think going back to like being unintentionally or intentionally uncomfortable, whatever, playing with that dynamic, I think that immediately relates to tattoos. It immediately relates to like the act of getting tattooed or tattooing someone. I'm doing an apprenticeship right now, so I'm learning more about like that craft too.
Really?
Yeah, which is really fun. And I had a long conversation with the artist who did my stomach. His name's Aaron Dale in Greenville, North Carolina. He's great. We had a long conversation while he was doing that tattoo about like how tattooing is this like inherently human experience. It's this inherently vulnerable experience. You have to trust this person enough to do this. They have to trust you enough to let them do it. And you are intentionally in pain for that amount of time.
Right.
You've decided this. You've picked this to do. And I think, which I only started getting tattooed a few years ago. It hasn't really, I don't have that many. It hasn't been that long. And when I started getting tattooed, it was almost like a revelation of like, oh, this is almost the same thing as what I'm making in a way. Because it's like, I chose this. I understand where it's living. And then once I started getting more, I was like, I can understand where these need to be and how it affects the overall look, the overall composition, but also just in like that intentionally uncomfortable way is like, this relates so weirdly in this totally different way to what I'm doing. It's like, but all like, it's all this like weird mental thing because it's like, I know that I need physical space. I know that where my negative space needs to be and pieces that I'm making. And now I get to literally decide to be an active participant in this like intentionally uncomfortable thing. And I don't know. It sounds insane to describe. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not like it feels like I'm just like rambling through something, but I promise that it makes sense. It's like, it's really difficult to describe. It's like I said, it's like I'm describing math that isn't real. It's like I'm just making things up on like as I see them, but it's just because it's like that. That's also one of those things that comes very naturally. It's like this visual space, this like effect that negative space has on a whole composition comes very naturally to me. And yeah,
That's
Yeah.
precisely
Sorry to
why.
ramble on and on
Not
for
at
about
all.
that, yeah.
That's precisely why I wanted to ask you about it, because I get the sense, like, just from your answer too, I get the sense that like you're aware of something that I think a lot of us don't articulate often. And I like, seriously, I get from you talking, I get this vibe that you're like actually sensitive to space and like how space works. And that's something that I would think a visual artist would have, but I've talked to a lot of visual artists and different ones focus on different things.
yeah, for sure.
But I can just tell from certain things you say that like space matters to you.
Yeah,
And I can
definitely.
also see from your tattoo placements that like you're keen on, like, you are
Yeah,
aware of
they're
space.
they're fairly measured out. Like I have these 2 here, these 2 here, 2 on my legs, and 1 on my stomach. So it's like even just in the order I've gotten them, it's been very like here, 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 here. Like it's bounced around so that when I'm thinking about where they are, it feels balanced in a way, which I don't know if that's how people do things. I have no idea, but it's like, that's the way I had to approach it. It was like, my first one was here. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I was just like, that's where it's going. I designed this one on my laptop while I was at work. And I was like, I'm getting that tattooed, I guess. And it's going to go right here. And that's the only place it can go. And I think like some of that is like, your first tattoo is like, you are really, really specific about it and blah, blah, blah. But then as I've gotten more, it's kind of continued on. It's like this one was my second one. And it's like right across from that one. And then I got my legs done at the same time, which is just, it says doom and gloom across my knees. and I got those 2 and this one done at the same time. So it's literally like a grid. It's like one square. Which does, like, I don't know. It feels weird to describe, but that's why I did it that way.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's just going to look right. It's going to be one rectangle. They're all going to connect in like a weird way. And that's it.
That's so funny because I guess this reveals things about
Yeah.
the way you think. I got these the same day. I got this one lower down on my arm so that they would be not exactly reflective
Yeah.
of each other. And this was the first one I got, and my dad said, you're probably going to want, you might want to get it on both arms. And I was like, no, because then it'll be like too balanced.
Too
I don't
balanced.
want like a perfect
That's
balance.
the other thing is like, you can't be too balanced.
Yeah.
That's weirdly, that's how I started to feel. Was I had this one, and these 2. And I was like, now I'm just a square. so now I have to, then I got this one. So it like offset it a little, and then I got this whole like my elbow down to my arm done, and then I was like, okay, cool. It's like a little out of balance now.
Yeah.
And then I got my stomach done to center it all.
That's
And
perfect.
it's like, all right, cool. So and now I'm like, I don't know what my next one's gonna be.
Yeah.
It might be like down on my leg or something, and then like throw the balance off a little more, but still be visually right. I don't know.
Man, I love the unspoken psychology of tattoos and body modification.
Oh my gosh,
it's
absolutely.
so weird and interesting and beautiful.
It's so interesting. I love it.
Yeah. And so another question that had come to mind that I think still is relevant to sort of this is sort of the compartmentalization that you were hinting at with your workspace. Because it sounds like, again, you're sensitive to placement. You're
Yeah.
sensitive to where things go. And I'm wondering how you've described your workspace a little bit as like not only somewhere where you can push things back out of your way and move things, but
Yeah.
I get the sense that certain things belong certain places.
Definitely. I mean, so I have like basically what amounts to like a digital workstation. It's like it has my laptop, my iPad, and like my sketchbook and my schedule, and like some pens and pencils, the random stuff. because I still need my sketchbook on in that section because it's like that's still where I'm doing the majority of the work. On the other side of the room, there's a table in the middle of the room, just like one of those like fold out stand up tables, in line with the window. It's on the top floor. Window comes in. My printer's right below the window. Table, right there. And then I have this rolling cart against another wall. That's like collage / like physical drawing area. So like, obviously you kind of need a lot of space for collage stuff because you're cutting stuff out. You might need it right now. You might need it later. So I wanted to have a space where I could say, flip through like old magazines or whatever and be like, oh, that's interesting. I'll tear that out and it goes in this pile. Oh, that's interesting. I can use that right now for this collage I'm working on. I'll put that where that actual work is happening. Is like, even the table is like weirdly split in half because it's like, here's a collage I'm actively working on, and over here is stuff that I'm sorting through to see if I can use it right now. And then in that rolling cart, it's like the drawer has stuff I've already cut out in that I'm not using right now. The lower rungs of it have like other stuff that I haven't started looking through yet. So it's like, I think going back to like early in the conversation about like different works or like single use spaces, right? It's like that space, while it's in the same room, that space is for that. It is for like almost like traditional art making. It's like I can paint over there, I can draw over there, I can make collages over there. I can't do any of that at my desk because my desk has to stay in like a certain level of orderly because digital work is like my main work. I can't have like glue and stuff over there or like collage pieces getting moved around because I need to grab a pencil over here, like, or it's mixed in with, I put it in the back of my sketchbook because my sketchbook was right there and I can put it in the back and then never remember it's there, that kind of thing. So
right.
I think a lot of it was born out of this, I don't want to say forgetfulness, but like necessity of, if I can leave all this stuff out, I'll go back to it. If I shove it somewhere, it's gone.
So you're reducing some kind of obstacle, it sounds like.
Yeah, I want to be able, like, I figured out, I just like came to a realization with the collage I'm working on right now because it's been out for a month yesterday. Like I walked in, I was like, I know what I can put there. And I go to like the free bin at McKay's all the time, like grab a bunch of stuff out of there. And I found like the perfect thing and had just been looking through it and then like left it open, came back in to my office yesterday and was like, oh, that can go right there in that space that I need something right now. It's like reducing the obstacles of like having to get everything back out, finding the things that I need, figuring out where I left the thing that I was going to use has been really beneficial to creating more stuff. It's like I can see it all, so I can just keep working. It's like if I'm stalling with a client or like waiting for them to respond to an email or needing to, like, they got to get something figured out so they can email me back, or they haven't paid an invoice yet so I can't send their final files, like that kind of thing. I can step 5 feet this way and be working on something totally different.
I love that idea. I mean, I think originally with the layout of this room, that was kind of the spirit, was to minimize any obstacles between me and music creation.
Yeah.
Recording, I have found that I don't know if it's worked perfectly for this space, I guess is my idea. And I'm wondering, I don't know, like I'm hearing you talk about that makes me wonder if I can revisit that idea or something. But I think part of it is because there's a difference, I guess, in here between I can create music anytime, and that's what I end up doing is I can play instruments anytime. That's easy to do. However, I don't find that I've increased my likelihood of recording anything, and I think it's because I don't like to have like mics and cables laying around a whole lot.
Yeah,
That's
so fair.
And they might be like having glue in my digital area. You know what I mean? That's kind of like the thing.
It's like a weird obstacle almost,
Yeah.
like that you wouldn't think would be a problem, but then even if it's just sitting in the way, it's like, oh,
It's a
there's
distraction.
too much stuff on
Yeah.
my desk now. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I want to revisit that, I think. But
You've got options.
yeah, there's options.
You got a
There's
fairly large space. You have plenty of options.
a lot of space. Yeah. And I used to fuck with collages, as you might have noticed with that
Yeah.
piano. I've got hella collage stuff downstairs. I might actually see if you're interested in any of it.
Yeah,
It's
please.
not something I do a ton of anymore. So I might see if you
Yeah, please.
fancy any of it.
Anytime.
So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I guess it's been about an hour and a half.
Wow.
It's flying by.
Yes, yeah.
You're fun to talk to.
Thanks. I
Um,
appreciate it. Oh.
Is there anything that you've been maybe exploring specifically creatively that comes to mind?
Lately, I've been really interested in like how I can represent things in like more abstract ways, less like representative, and less like less specific, like letting the viewer in less, more to sparse, or like more to figure out as you look at stuff, and how I can like add this layer of I can't think of the right word, this layer of vagueness, almost this layer of mystery. I got really into these video games called Dark Souls. You know about these?
No, I didn't know nothing about video games.
Fair enough. They're super they're like medieval settings. So it's like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all by the same developer, all by the same company. They're like all medieval settings. They're notoriously difficult. The story is always very, very vague. You get it in like little bits and pieces from characters in the game. And there's a lot to kind of like figure out on your own. They're all very heavy, but with like moments of this like levity. Like how can you like how to find that levity in like these like very dark environments, very like heavy emotional spaces. And like I've been trying to play with like this sense of vagueness that they gave me in this like story way of like how can I incorporate more almost more user interaction in a way, like and to think about video games, but like in my work, like viewer interaction. How do I tell people something but also get them interested in this like story aspect of it, or this like tiny detail over here and I haven't really like leaned in yet. It's something I'm like actively considering because I love to tell stories. I love to like insert narrative into my work in fairly like, I guess, semi straightforward ways, but also like I want to explore how vague it can be and still come across in a way.
So I've noticed that now with where we are with AI and stuff,
Yeah.
a lot of these mediums are changing pretty drastically.
That's true.
And what you're making me think of, like a buddy of mine who he's like a legit producer, like at a large scale, and he is like, I was asking him recently, like, so what do you think is going to happen next in the world of the podcasting thing? And he told me, well, there's these people that are developing these experiences that are beyond podcasts, that are sort of like these whole spaces dedicated to the art form, but in a whole different way of storytelling. A whole like hotel room that'll be dedicated to audible
Interesting.
storytelling. And you're kind of making me think about that when thinking about sort of the future of storytelling as it relates to visual art or visual
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah.
And the only thing I've seen, because I don't really study that world, the only thing I've seen is that shit that people now can like kind of zoom. They can like a piece of art.
Oh
can,
yeah.
the
I know
stretch
exactly
it
what
out.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like infinite paper
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, I think there's room for human beings to become somehow more involved in like the stories that they want to hear. And it's like even just like going back to like Dark Souls or whatever, it's like those were like a really, really niche thing for people that were serious about games or whatever. And as time went on, people made like YouTube videos explaining the narrative. People made YouTube videos explaining like character motivations and stuff, because you don't really get any of that. You have to kind of assume.
Mm-hmm.
So you build this like very natural community of people who are trying to figure it out together. And then from then the community grows because people are realizing, oh, there's like, this is like kind of deep. There's like fairly deep levels of storytelling here. So, and now like they're like a huge company, huge production, like billions of copies sold of the last thing they put out, that kind of thing. It's not any more clear. It's still just as vague. But I think what that showed me, I think, and like from a creative perspective, was like there's room for vagueness.
Yeah.
There's room for people to interpret things and be wrong, and it still mean a lot to them.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I think there's room in like human cognition in general to go, what does that mean? I really like it. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I have no idea what it means, and I love it. And I think there's room for that in like spaces I'm operating in. And yeah, I don't know. I'm exploring it like mentally. I haven't like really leaned in. I've got some ideas working, but it's something I'm really interested in.
I dig that, man. That same exploration, I think, can take place in the music world too. There's sort of a spectrum of, I think the best way I've heard of it is like a spectrum of utility and surprise, something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Or non-convention, however you might want to say it. But there's, I think a lot of art forms start out in the sort of utility side of the spectrum, where it's just like super plain to see.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people will go into the abstract in a way that's like beyond, like separate from utility. And I guess, frankly, I mean, like sometimes with visual art, what I experience in the abstract is sort of like, I'm like looking for the utility. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Well, I think that's kind of the line that like I want to be around. Is like I don't want to be making stuff that's like totally non-representational.
You're right.
Like I love representational art. It's my favorite. And so like, how do you make something representational that's also very vague, and or has that element of surprise to it? It's like without immediately looking at it and immediately knowing what's going on, how do you capture like this like sense of vagueness, or this sense of like interest, I guess.
I fuck with that. I mean, that sounds like it speaks to my taste for sure. I love that
It's really
balance.
cool, yeah.
So when you say like, I mean, that's just interesting because I feel like I've spoken to some artists who are, at least they do representative shit, and some of them are more on the fine art side of like,
Sure.
I can do a portrait of somebody that's just straight up a great portrait of somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you say you love representative art, I guess, does that put you in a different community than the abstract artists?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm wondering what, like, for a
think-
visual perspective as the
Sure.
artist, like if there's distinct different perceptions, I guess, that go into like that side of the world versus the other.
I think it depends on the person, but I think for me, it's like it's different flavors almost, right? It's like abstract art, if we're talking like fine art, is hitting this specific itch in my brain at a certain time. Mm-hmm. Whereas representational art's hitting a different one. And I guess when I say representational art, a lot of the time it's more modern stuff. It's stuff that, or like the stuff I grew up on. I'm big on source material. I'm big on like what I was first into. And so it's like, to me, representational art extends to like cartoons that I watched, or comic books that I read, or even like album artwork, skateboard graphics, that kind of t-shirt graphics. That stuff's all representational art to me. And so for me, a big facet of loving representational art is the fact that there can be a story to it.
Yeah.
It's something I connect to so easily. Abstract art takes a little more work. You know, a lot of time it's like, where am I coming at this from? But then there are people like, so what's her name? She's a painter. abstract expression. Helen Frankenthaler is this abstract expressionist. Big planes of color, but they're very aggressive. Comes from this place of like raw emotion, it feels like to me. And that kind of thing is inspiring to me too, because it's like there's this level of letting go that's involved, right? And there's that high level of vagueness, right? It's like what was she experiencing during this time? What did she feel like this was supposed to represent versus what do I feel like it represents, right? And I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in the conversation off of abstract art, off of representational art, of like which one is better, which one is
Right.
connecting. I could make that whole thing. And it's like, to me, none of that shit matters. It's like, what am I gaining from this? What do I feel like after I looked at that? What do I feel like the story to this is? I'm always going to naturally interpret things as having a story, I think. And so I think leaning into like representational but vague kind of gives me that like connection of like the abstract, maybe the strange or ominous or whatever, and representational lets me do both. And yeah, it's something I'm figuring out how to do.
Yeah. And I come dangerously close probably to pitting those two sides of the spectrum against each other, especially as it relates to what I do, particularly because, I've made jokes, I guess, about at the expense of some songwriters who go into the abstract realms,
Sure.
like Bon Iver, who, I think it just reveals a part of my mentality.
Sure.
I think, which is just that I like the anchor of art being connected, I think, to real life or to material life, something
Yeah.
like that. And so when I like picture the skill set of somebody who goes into the canvas and explores it in this way that like expresses color very freely and without the confines of reality, I think it reveals that for me as a consumer or a person who's looking for that story, I don't connect to that story as well as I do something that
fair.
reminds me of real life. And I think that's true about how I feel about movies, how I feel about like, what's his name? Terrence Malick, I think, compared to somebody like Charlie Kaufman. Both still very abstract.
Sure.
But Terrence's stories, they're so much more freely moving than somebody like Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman's still very fucking strange in his approach to storytelling, And I like strange and unpredictable, but
You read Antkind?
Antkind?
Yeah. Is that a Charlie Kaufman? I think so.
I don't know if I've seen that.
I think so. I think it's a novel. I'll have to check.
Oh, the novel.
Yeah.
No, I haven't read that.
It's good.
Okay.
It's
yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it just again agreeing, I guess, with your observation, which is that there's no reason for me to like put these two in a war with each other necessarily, and try to create a hierarchy of necessary quality or distinction of quality between the two.
Yeah.
But I do notice about myself that I like that anchor.
There's something about like mundane and surrealist in a way that goes together really well to me. It's like, there's an artist, Slaughter Beach Dog. I don't know if you know them. It's like a folk indie kind of deal.
No, but I want
off the back of like a early 2010s like punk band. And they're great. And something that I think the what's his name? Jake Ewall, something like that. He's so good about writing lyrics about nothing at all. Like just normal everyday stuff that feel really important. And I find myself like pulled to things like that. I mean, Murakami's great about that too. Haruki Murakami, the writer, is great about that kind of thing, writing things that are super mundane, describing every meal that the character in the book had that day. But it ends up making you feel like, is it important for me to know that? Is that a detail I need to have for later? It's almost like if you can add this like narrative and real life to this sense of like vagueness and strangeness, it almost makes the reality more important.
Yeah.
And I'm really drawn to things like that. And so that's kind of where my headspace is at.
I fuck with that. Have you seen that movie that's like about? It's a very popular movie that I can't remember the name of, but we showed it. I work with Aperture. That's how you and I think, first
Oh, yeah, yeah,
communicated
yeah.
with each other. And last year we showed this movie that a lot of people know of. The name escapes me, but it's about a woman who starts like a ramen restaurant.
I feel like I know what you're
It's
talking
an
about.
Asian film,
Yeah.
and in that movie, there's all these subplots that just take you out of the main story for
love
about
that.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Take you to a whole different story.
Yeah.
That goes apparently nowhere. And when I first started seeing this movie, what I thought was happening was they were introducing a new storyline that would collide, but it turned out these were all just
doesn't.
characters that just took 5 minutes away from the story, and then you come back to it, and I was just like, that is the coolest shit.
That's so cool.
It's so fun.
It's so free too.
Yeah.
It's like, why not do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's so
And
much. It's so
it
creative.
It feels so connective. It's like that is what life is.
Exactly.
It's like you want to be involved with this person and like who's starting a ramen restaurant. You know her. You're talking to her, but then there's all this shit happening outside. Like, so I don't know. That's awesome.
Yeah. I will find you
awesome.
the
Please-
name of that
please
movie.
do, 'cause I'd
it's
love to-
so
I'd love
worth
to
the
watch that.
watch. It's so good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like I could ask you about creativity for 4 hours.
We'll just do another one. Let's just run it back. We'll do another one.
Well, I'll truly just anytime you want to come on, just
I'm
come
always
on.
down. Always down. Just let me know.
Hell yeah. Well, Christian, I guess we'll wrap up for today,
Yeah,
and let's
absolutely.
do it again, man.
Yeah, we'll just plan another one.
All right.
All right.
Boom.